Welcome back to the Trump interview. Now, one of the comments that he made there in the strongest of possible terms was his objection to wind energy. He doesn't believe in it. He says it can't operate or survive without taxpayer subsidy, that it's unreliable and indeed that it's ugly. Let's just remind ourselves of what Trump had to say about Boris Johnson's policy on wind farms.
Boris is wrong. If he's going heavy into wind, I mean, you're telling me, but if he's going heavy into wind, he's wrong. He's making a big mistake.
Well, let's debate this. Let's debate this. And I'm joined now by Tom Burke, CBE, chairman of E3G, third generation environmentalism, former government advisor on climate change, and former executive director of Friends of the Earth. Tom, thank you for joining us on this debate, and I know we're going to have a fair bit of disagreement over what Donald Trump said. But before we do that, can we just agree on one thing? That offshore wind farms are very, very ugly, aren't they?
No, they're not very ugly. What you think is ugly is not what everybody thinks is ugly. What I think is ugly, other people think is very beautiful. It's entirely up to you what you think is beautiful. Mr. Trump doesn't like the wind farms and thinks they're ugly because they built some offshore one of his golf courses. I understand why he might take that opinion, but don't see I need to pay much attention to it.
Okay, well, as you say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I happen to think they're pig ugly, but we can all make up, as you say, our own minds. Now, when it comes to number one, price, you know, it is true, isn't it, Tom? It is true that British taxpayers and taxpayers across the rest of the world have been asked to fork out tens of billions of pounds and dollars in subsidies just to make this industry operate, and that the cost of that goes on householders on average income.
Well, it's part of the truth. But you want to tell the rest of the truth. We also subsidize our existing fossil fuel industries, like BPs and Shells of the world. They still get fossil fuels. Every nuclear power station on the planet gets massive government subsidies. So I don't know that there's anything very remarkable about saying that you public subsidizes things. What's actually happening right now is that wind power in this country provides the cheapest electricity available.
Well, that's all well and good, Tom, when the wind blows. But what happens when the wind doesn't blow? And very interesting set of circumstances that happened in Texas last year. And as you well know, Texas has put quite a high reliance on wind energy, but they finished up in a very, very cold spell, and they finished up with major power outages. And isn't this the danger of over-reliance? I can buy the argument that maybe wind can be somewhere there in the mix, but that over-reliance on an unreliable source of energy is actually strategically quite a big mistake to make.
Let me take two parts of the point you made. The first part about wind being variable, that's absolutely true. So is demand. The grid copes with that all the time. Incidentally, nuclear power stations are only available about 70% of the time. Nothing is always on, always available. So the question is, have you designed an electricity grid that can cope with that variability? Well, we have. You can clearly see we have, because we haven't had any problems with it. What happened in Texas, which was the second point you made, was exactly that. Texas had a grid run on very, very fundamentalist market principles, which meant nobody invested in maintaining the integrity of the grid. So when it ran into extreme weather events, the grid collapsed. Actually, in Texas, the bit of the grid that went on working were the wind machines, because it provides the cheapest electricity in Texas as well, by the way, which is interesting. That's an untold bit of the story, but it's a true bit of the story.
Well, I think burning coal, whether one wants to or not, and indeed turning on the tap for burning gas is utterly reliable, provided, of course, you've got the stocks. But let's not argue too much about that. Tom, I want to leave the last minute or so to you. Would you respond, please, to what Donald Trump said in that interview about the wind industry, just so that our viewers have got some real balance in this debate?
You mean the thing he said about it being expensive? The thing he said about, I don't remember all the things he said. The thing you have to remember about Donald Trump is he's wrong about just about everything. So why would I expect him to be right about wind power? I don't expect him to be right about wind power. He's got an enormous number of other things wrong. He's not getting this wrong. By the way, really interesting to see that the US is now leaving the field open on renewables to the Chinese and the others because they're not bothering to compete in this area, which is actually where the markets, the capitalists, if you like, of the world are increasingly seeing the future of energy supply. So I think what he thinks is not only bad for the climate, it's also very bad for the competitiveness of the American economy.
Okay, Tom Burke, CBE, thank you for joining us and giving the other side of the argument. Well, nobody can say that here on GB News, we don't let you, the viewer, see both sides of the argument. I have to say, I am deeply sceptical about over-reliance on wind energy myself.